can explain the relationships between victims' risk and perpetrators' selection process. So that is the main theme of this paper. So I will introduce theoretical perspective and also statistical notions about these interactions between offenders and victims. And I'll use the Korean crime victimization survey to identify the combination of these things. So first, so the first is victimization. As I explained, victimization events are always concentrated on small portion of population. Actually, 97% of population is just victimized one time or not at all. But they cover 50% of victimization, but only 3% of population. This is the data set from the National Crime Victimization in America. So 3% of population are victimized for 50% of all the crime incidents. So basically, the idea of victimization is this concentration of victimization event indicates the different risk of victimization. So people with more number of victimization actually may have higher risk. So the previous studies always argued these frequencies of victimization indicate their risk. So we can identify some people with higher risk, or it's kind of event dependent, but they are pretty much same idea. So they have different risk of victimization. They have higher risk of victimization. So we can identify these people and we can identify the characteristics of these victims. So after altering these characteristics or after protecting these victims, we can prevent crime incidents more effectively. So that is kind of victim-oriented crime prevention. So previously, in traditional criminology, actually, whenever we talking about crime prevention, we focused on offender side. So how can we prevent these offenders? But victim-oriented crime prevention is rather than concentrating on offenders' problem, we can concentrate on victims' propensity, their lifestyle, their self-control. So what are the problems of them, and what are the reasons of multiple victimizations? So that was the basic idea of victim-oriented crime prevention. So, but recently there are two studies, actually, which revealed actually the frequency of victimization is not the result of only victims' risk. The first study was random lipid. Random lipid indicates even if all population have enjoyed the same probability to be victimized, some people will be victimized multiple times while others will not be victimized. So basically the thing is, basic statistical process is once one people was victimized, he or she is not excluded from the pool. So he can or she can be chosen by accidentally again. So basically, the frequency of victimization does not indicate the real risk of victimization. We have to consider this, but I do not mean, this paper does not mean, actually this was my previous paper, it does not mean there is no risk heterogeneity. There are some people with high risk, but that high risk cannot be identified only based on previous victimization. We have to identify other reasons, their lifestyles or self-control or possible reasons. After considering these characteristics, we can identify the real people with high risk. Not just based on number of victimization, but based on their characteristics, other variables. That is basic idea of random lipid. So it was published this year, 2013, and also there is one paper about immunity. So previous studies argued actually higher risk, or if you victimize, you have higher chance to be victimized later. So previous victimization increased the greater possibility, probability to be victimized. That is the event dependence. So they introduced these two reasons for higher concentration of victimization events. But actually, this is a paper from the scholars, and they argued there is another reason of victimization concentration. That is the immune effect, the immune group. So there are some people with low or no chance to be victimized. Very easy example is the car theft. If you do not have a car, you will be excluded from the pool. You cannot be victimized for car theft. So there is some people which cannot be victimized for car theft. So previously we didn't pay attention to this immune group, but actually I'll introduce the reason to consider this part. But some other scholars already identified actually these immune groups also increase the overexpression, which means concentration of victimization. So in order to correctly identify the risk of victimization or victims, actually we have to think about not only previous number of victimization, but also these random effects and also immune effect. These are pretty much what we have achieved in terms of victimization. And I want to add one more thing today. That is not only victims' risk, not only victims' propensity or probability to be victimized, but also we have to think about the other side. For frequency of victimization, it is not the only result of victims' risk. Actually, there is one more side, which is offender selectivity. They will choose victims based on their preference. So in order to correctly understand the reasons of risk, reasons of higher concentration of victimization events, we have to understand both sides, not only victims' risk, but offenders' selectivity. That is the main idea of this paper. So basically, why do we need to consider these two parts? Actually, there are two reasons. Theoretically, it is more meaningful. Just victims' risk, yes, it's possible, but still, crime incidence is not the result of only victims' risk. It is interaction. Crime incidence, that means offenders select some victims, and also victims' risk increase the possibility. So basically, it is interaction between victims and offenders. So in order to understand the distribution of victimization events, we have to understand these two things. That is theoretical background of this argument. Also, I analyzed the frequency of victimization. I found statistically all the count data models, such as Poisson, negative binomial. Nowadays we are using zero-inflated negative binomial or zero-inflated Poisson or Hubble models. All these models mathematically consider both parts, not only victims' risk. These models mathematically designed to consider offender selectivity and victims' risk. So in order to interpret the result of all the counter data modeling, we have to consider both sides, not just one. So I developed 5 interaction models. The first one is random selection. And the second one is random selection with immune group. The model 3, the third model is random and non-random selection. Non-random, the model 4 is only non-random selection, and the last model is random and non-random selection with immune effect. So I developed 5 models which can explain the interactions between risk and offender selectivity. The first model is a random selection model. It is basically talking about victims' risk is pretty much same, similar to all populations. So they do not have higher risk or lower risk, but they have kind of chance to be victimized. Practically, the risk of victimization cannot be the same across all people. They have each people has its own risk of victimization based on their lifestyle or their self-control, their relationships with other people. So these things basically determine the exact amount of risk. So each individual has its own, his or her own risk of victimization. But these differences is not meaningful if they cannot influence the victim's and offender selectivity. That is, actually, their different risk of victimization can influence the distribution of victimization only when these risk heterogeneity can influence the offender selectivity. So basically, the first model is these heterogeneity, risk heterogeneity actually does not influence offender selectivity. So I expect kind of petty crimes. The tiny crimes, the offender does not have strong motivation. Maybe it is mainly conducted by instant motivation. And victim, in the given term, they do not have specific high risk of victimization. So I expect under this circumstance, the frequency of victimization, number of victimization will be based on random selection process. Offenders will select victims basically by chance. The thing is, as I explained, even if the victimization is the random process, some people will be victimized multiple times, even while other people is not victimized at all. Still, victimization event will be concentrated. So that is basic idea of randomness. And the first model I denoted as RS model. RS model is random process, random victimization. Actually, statistically, the random selection process can be explained Poisson process. So I do not spend a lot of time explaining the mathematical function, but basically it is randomly selection process. So offender does not have strong preference. They just commit crimes by chance. So victims will be victimized. People will be victimized based on their random chance. That is the first model. And the second model is random selection with the immune group. So I named it as RSI model. Actually, it is basically people have a similar risk of victimization. It's actually same with the first model. But still, there is an immune group, which means there are some people who are not vulnerable to this type of crime. So, a tiny crime or a car theft, maybe there are some people who do not have risk of victimization. So in this case, the thing is, mathematically, random concentration. There is no people with high risk of victimization. The thing is, if there is an immune group, the other side, non-immune group, will have higher concentration of victimization. That is basic statistical notion of RSI model. Basically, it looks like it is over dispersed, which means it is more dispersed, they are higher concentration than expected by just random instances. But it was not caused by high risk people, but actually it was caused by immune group. If there is immune group, actually offender can choose their target only from non-immune group. Immune group already excluded from the pool, the victimization pool. So actually randomly increased for non-immune group. So if you merge these two groups in one statistical model, actually it looks like over-dispersed. There are some people with higher risk, but that is not true. Actually, there is an immune group. That immune group actually increased the concentration of victimization. So in order to identify the real reasons of higher concentration of victimization, we have to run the statistical model and see if RSI model is correct or the next model is correct. The next model is random and non-random, which means actually there are a lot of people who share similar risk of victimization. So they are victimized. They are selected by the offenders by chance. But at the same time, there are some people with high risk of victimization. They are going outside more frequently. They have a lot of, night, lifestyle, or they kind of different lifestyle, self-control, different friends, different things actually can influence their risk of victimization. So there are some people with similar victimization. They are sharing similar lifestyle, so they have quite similar risk of victimization. They will be selected randomly. But there are some few people who have kind of high risk of victimization. If we have these two groups, it is over this tree. There are some people with higher frequency of victimization. Yes, they have high risk of victimization. They will be victimized multiple times, more than other people. So it looks like over this person. So I named this model is RNS, random and non-random selection. Actually, the appropriate model which can analyze this process is negative binomial model. Negative binomial model actually introduced over dispersion parameter. Over dispersion parameter actually identify some portion which does not fit the Poisson process, which is random selection. So that is negative binomial model. The fourth model is non-random selection. That is, there is no random victimization. Victimization event exclusively based on the relationship between victim and offender. I think the easiest case is domestic violence. Domestic violence cannot be happen only by chance. It must be based on strong relationship, some kind of relationship between offender and victim. So victimization event is exclusively based on certain relationship between victim and offender. There is no random event. There is no random victimization. All victimization events is non-random selection. One important thing is if victimization events is only based on non-random selection, which we cannot use count data models.